The sun was shining warmly over the small town that Saturday afternoon. A soft breeze moved gently through the trees, carrying the sound of children laughing in the distance. The local park was peaceful, filled with the voices of families enjoying their weekend. Birds chirped from the branches above, and the sky stretched clear and blue, as if it was a perfect day made for calmness and joy. Daniel sat by the window of his living room, watching the sunlight pour into their little house. For the past 3 weeks, life had changed completely. His wife, Emily, had given birth to their daughter, Lily, and their days had been filled with sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and the sweet but sometimes overwhelming cries of a newborn. Though the exhaustion was real, Daniel felt grateful. Every time he saw Lily's tiny fingers curl around his or watched Emily cradle her gently, he felt his heart swell. Parenthood was harder than anything he had ever known, but it was also more beautiful than he had ever imagined. Emily walked into the room, carrying Lily close to her chest. Her eyes looked tired with faint circles under them, but her smile was warm. "She just woke up again," she whispered softly, careful not to disturb the calm. Daniel smiled. "She's keeping us busy, isn't she?" Emily nodded, brushing her hand across Lily's soft cheek. "I think some fresh air would be good for her." "And for me too." Daniel's face brightened. He had been thinking the same thing. Spending so many hours inside had left Emily pale and worn out. A short walk outside, surrounded by nature, might bring her comfort. "Let's go to the park," Daniel suggested. "It's quiet around this time. We can sit under the big tree near the pond." Emily hesitated for a moment. She was still recovering, and stepping outside with a newborn felt like a big step. But the thought of fresh air and the gentle sounds of the park convinced her. "All right," she agreed with a small smile. Together, they prepared Lily's small stroller, packed a soft blanket, and carried a little bag with all the things a newborn might need: diapers, wipes, and a bottle. The simple task of packing felt like an adventure in itself, but Daniel and Emily laughed through it, helping each other and moving carefully so Lily would stay calm. Soon, they were out the door, walking slowly down the familiar street toward the park. The stroller wheels made a soft rolling sound against the sidewalk. Daniel walked beside Emily, his hand sometimes brushing hers, a silent reminder that they were together in this journey. When they entered the park, Emily felt her shoulders relax. The fresh air touched her face, and she inhaled deeply, letting the gentle breeze clear her tiredness. The sight of children running, parents chatting, and families enjoying the weekend filled her heart with a sense of belonging. They found the bench Daniel had mentioned, under the wide branches of a tree that gave perfect shade. The pond sparkled nearby, reflecting the golden sunlight. Emily sat down carefully, cradling Lily in her arms. Daniel sat beside her, watching their baby stretch her tiny arms and yawn. "This feels nice," Emily whispered, leaning her head back against the bench. Daniel nodded. "I told you it would help." He reached over and touched Lily's hand, smiling when her little fingers wrapped around his. For a while, everything was peaceful. Emily hummed a soft tune as she rocked Lily gently. Daniel sat quietly, simply enjoying the moment. But as time passed, Lily began to fuss, her small cries breaking the calm. Emily immediately knew what her baby needed. She adjusted her position and began feeding Lily, her movements full of care and love. It was a natural, tender moment, a mother meeting her child's needs. But just as Emily started to relax again, a sharp, unfriendly voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" Emily froze. Daniel turned his head quickly toward the voice. A woman was marching toward them, her face twisted with disapproval. Her steps were firm, almost angry, and her eyes were locked on Emily. She was dressed neatly, her hair tied back tightly, and she carried herself with the air of someone used to giving orders. Her tone was loud enough that several people nearby turned to look. Emily felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She had never liked drawing attention to herself, especially not like this. She looked down at Lily, who was still feeding peacefully, unaware of the storm that was approaching. Daniel stood protectively, sensing the hostility in the woman's voice. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. The woman crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. "You can't do that here," she snapped. "This is a family park. There are children around. It's indecent." Emily's heart began to race. She had read about stories where women were shamed in public for something as simple as feeding their babies. but she never imagined it would happen to her. She felt trapped, caught between the need to care for her child and the weight of a stranger's judgment. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew Emily's gentle heart, and he could see how shaken she was. He took a step closer to her, standing like a shield. "My wife is feeding our child," he said firmly, his voice steady. "She has every right to do this," the woman scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes. "Not here. Not in front of everyone. You should have stayed home if you needed to do that." "People don't want to see it. It's disgusting." Emily's eyes widened. Tears stung at the corners, though she fought to hold them back. She whispered to Daniel, her voice trembling. "Why is she saying this? I'm not doing anything wrong." Daniel reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "You're not," he said softly, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. But the woman wasn't done. She raised her voice even louder, drawing more attention from people passing by. "If you don't stop right now, I'll call the police. I'm not joking. This is against the rules." Emily gasped, her heart pounding faster. "The police?" she whispered in disbelief. Daniel's face hardened. She can't be serious, he thought. But the woman had already pulled out her phone, waving it like a weapon. Emily clutched Lily closer, her protective instincts flaring. All she wanted was to keep her baby safe, but suddenly, this peaceful afternoon had turned into a public confrontation. Strangers were watching. Some shook their heads at the woman, while others whispered quietly. The air felt heavy with tension. The woman pressed numbers on her phone with dramatic gestures, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "Yes, hello? I need the police. There's a woman here causing a disturbance. Feeding a baby in public. Yes, I said feeding a baby. This is unacceptable." Emily's lips trembled. Her hands shook slightly as she continued holding Lily, who remained unaware of the storm around her. Daniel's eyes burned with frustration. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. What should have been a peaceful, simple family outing had suddenly become a moment of humiliation and fear, and it was only the beginning. The park, which had been calm and full of laughter only minutes before, now felt heavy with unease. Parents who had been watching their children on the swings paused. Couples strolling by slowed their steps. Even the birds seemed quieter as the sharp voice of the angry woman echoed through the open space. Emily sat frozen on the bench, her newborn, Lily, still in her arms. She could feel her baby's soft breaths against her chest, a reminder of innocence in the middle of this storm. Her heart pounded fast and her mind raced with confusion. All she had done was feed her baby, something natural, something filled with love. Yet here she was, being treated as if she had committed a terrible act. Daniel remained standing, his eyes fixed firmly on the woman. His protective instincts were strong, and he was determined not to let anyone humiliate Emily for caring for their child. He had promised to stand by her, and this moment tested that promise more than he ever imagined. The woman, Karen, tightened her grip on her phone and looked at Emily with visible disgust. "You can't sit here and behave like this," she said again, her tone loud and full of judgment. "There are families around. You're making people uncomfortable." Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. Her throat felt dry and her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She glanced around at the small crowd forming nearby. Some looked concerned, some confused, and a few shook their heads at Karen's words. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice calm but carrying strength. "She's not doing anything wrong. My wife is feeding our daughter. That's what mothers do. There's no law against this, and there's no shame in it." Karen scoffed loudly, tilting her head with exaggerated disbelief. "Not here. Not in public. If you can't control yourselves, you should stay at home. This is indecent. Children could see this." Daniel clenched his jaw. He wanted to shout, but he knew shouting would only make Emily feel worse. He took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "The only thing indecent here is how you're treating a new mother. Do you have no respect? No kindness?" Emily's hands trembled as she held Lily closer, almost hiding her child from the heated exchange. Her heart was torn between fear and shame. A part of her wanted to leave immediately, to escape the stares and whispers. But another part of her deep inside wanted to stay strong, for herself, for Lily, and for every mother who had ever been shamed for doing something so natural. Karen shook her head, her face red with anger. "If you won't listen, then I'll make you listen," she declared, raising her phone high as though she was announcing something important. She pressed the numbers with force, speaking loudly for everyone to hear. Yes, police? I need you to come to the town park immediately. There's a woman here causing a disturbance. She's feeding a baby in public. Yes, I said feeding a baby. It's indecent. People are upset. Please hurry. Gasps echoed from the small crowd. A man standing nearby frowned deeply. Are you serious? He muttered, shaking his head. A young woman whispered to her friend. Why would anyone call the police for that? She's just being a mom. Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She leaned slightly toward Daniel, her voice soft and breaking. Why is she doing this to me? I'm just taking care of Lily. Daniel crouched beside her, placing a gentle hand on her arm. His eyes softened as he looked at her. Because some people don't understand, Emily, but you're not wrong. You're not guilty of anything. Don't let her make you feel ashamed. His words gave her a small measure of comfort, but the humiliation was still heavy. She could feel eyes on her, and the weight of judgment pressed down harder than she could bear. Still, she refused to let her baby sense her fear. She rocked Lily gently, whispering, It's okay, little one. Mommy's here. You're safe. Karen continued speaking into her phone, exaggerating every detail. Yes, she refuses to leave. She's disturbing everyone. You need to send officers right away. She ended the call with a dramatic sigh, sliding her phone back into her bag as though she had just performed a heroic act. Now, Karen said sharply, glaring at Daniel and Emily, the police will be here soon, and when they come, they'll tell you what I've been saying all along. You don't belong here doing this. Daniel rose to his feet again, his face calm but his voice edged with firmness. No, when they come, they'll see exactly what's happening. They'll see a mother caring for her child and a stranger harassing her. Karen's eyes widened slightly at his words, but she quickly covered it with a sneer. We'll see who's right soon enough, she replied coldly. The minutes stretched slowly. Emily's heart beat like a drum in her chest. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. Every second felt like an hour as she waited for the sound of sirens. Around her, people began murmuring. Some kept their distance, unwilling to get involved. Others inched closer, their faces filled with sympathy for Emily. One elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench finally spoke up. Her voice was calm but clear. Young lady, she said to Emily, don't you be ashamed. I raised 4 children myself and I fed them wherever they were hungry. What you're doing is the most natural thing in the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She managed a small smile. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel turned and nodded respectfully at the elderly woman. Her words were like a light in the darkness, reminding them they were not completely alone. Karen, however, rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Times have changed. There are rules about this sort of thing. The elderly woman looked at her calmly. No, dear. The only rule here is kindness. And you seem to have forgotten it. The crowd murmured in agreement, their whispers growing louder. For the first time, Karen seemed less confident. Her face tightened and she crossed her arms defensively. But before anything else could be said, a distant sound grew louder. The wail of sirens approaching. Emily's heart sank. The police were really coming. She tightened her grip on Lily, whispering softly into her baby's tiny ear. It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Daddy's here. We'll be okay. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, he said quietly but firmly. The truth is on our side. Just hold Lily, let me handle this. The sirens grew closer, echoing through the park. The small crowd shifted, some stepping back, others staying to witness what would unfold. The once peaceful afternoon had turned into a public spectacle. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to breathe, trying to calm her racing heart. She could feel the love for her baby burning stronger than the fear, pushing her to stay grounded, and then the flashing lights appeared at the edge of the park. 2 police officers stepped out of the car, their expressions professional but curious. They began walking toward the bench where Emily sat, Daniel standing protectively beside her, and Karen standing tall as though she had just saved the world. The confrontation was about to reach its peak. The soft afternoon breeze that once carried laughter now seemed heavy and still. All eyes in the park turned toward the flashing lights at the edge of the path. The police car rolled to a stop near the entrance, and 2 officers stepped out. Their dark uniforms contrasted against the golden sunlight, and their calm but serious faces carried an air of authority. Karen stood straighter, Her lips curled in satisfaction. She smoothed her blouse as if preparing for a performance. She glanced quickly at the small crowd around them, as though expecting applause for what she had done. Her chin lifted proudly. Emily, however, felt her heart sink. Her arms tightened around Lily, who lay peacefully against her chest, unaware of the storm that surrounded her. Emily's breathing grew unsteady, her chest rising and falling faster than she wanted. This was supposed to be a simple walk, a moment of peace with her husband and baby. Now it felt like the whole world was staring, waiting to see what would happen next. Daniel placed one hand gently on her shoulder. His calm strength steadied her for a moment. "It's all right," he whispered. "Just stay calm. We've done nothing wrong. Let them see that." The officers walked closer, their footsteps steady on the gravel path. One of them, tall with kind but watchful eyes, spoke first. "What seems to be the problem here?" Before Daniel or Emily could speak, Karen stepped forward, pointing her finger dramatically at Emily. "There. That woman. She's causing a scene. She's feeding her baby out here in the open, in front of everyone. It's indecent. She refused to leave when I told her to. I called you because she's disturbing the peace." The words spilled from Karen's mouth quickly, her voice rising with each sentence. She looked at the officers expectantly, as if she was certain they would immediately agree with her. Emily's cheeks burned. Her throat tightened and she lowered her gaze, wishing she could disappear. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back, focusing on Lily's tiny face. "I'm just feeding my baby," she whispered to herself, almost too quietly to be heard. Daniel stepped closer to the officers, his voice calm but filled with controlled emotion. "Officers, my wife and I came here to enjoy a quiet afternoon. Our newborn became hungry and my wife did what any mother would do. She fed her. That's all. She's not disturbing anyone. The only disturbance has come from this woman who chose to confront us." The taller officer looked between Daniel and Emily, then at Lily, who lay calmly in her mother's arms. His expression softened slightly. The second officer, shorter and older, raised an eyebrow at Karen. "Ma'am, is this really why you called us? Because a mother was feeding her child?" Karen gasped, clearly offended. "Of course. Isn't it obvious? She's breaking public rules. Children could see this. Families don't want to be exposed to this sort of behavior. It's inappropriate." Several people in the crowd murmured disapprovingly at Karen's words. One man folded his arms and shook his head. A woman nearby whispered loudly enough to be heard. "The only inappropriate thing here is her behavior." The officers exchanged a quick glance. The older one sighed quietly and spoke with steady patience. "Ma'am, feeding a baby is not against the law. In fact, the law protects a mother's right to feed her child in public if she chooses to. What she is doing is natural, necessary, and not indecent." Karen's mouth fell open in disbelief. "What? That can't be right. There must be a rule against this. You can't let her sit here like this." The tall officer shook his head. "There's no law being broken here. What's happening is a mother caring for her newborn. That's all we see." For the first time, Karen's confidence faltered. Her eyes darted nervously toward the crowd, who now looked less sympathetic and more critical of her actions. Some crossed their arms, some frowned, and a few even whispered openly about how unreasonable she was being. Emily felt a rush of relief wash over her. Though her body still trembled from the confrontation, she looked at Daniel, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He gave her a reassuring nod, silently telling her to stay strong. The older officer turned back to Karen. His voice was firm but polite. "Ma'am, I understand you may have personal feelings about this, but those feelings don't give you the right to harass others. Right now, you're the one causing a disturbance, not her." Karen's face flushed bright red. Her lips tightened as she tried to form a reply, but no words came out. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being corrected in public. Emily finally gathered the courage to speak. Her voice was soft but clear, trembling slightly. "I wasn't trying to upset anyone. My baby was hungry. That's all. I would never mean to disturb people. I only wanted to care for her." The tall officer gave her a small nod of understanding. "You don't need to apologize, ma'am. You did nothing wrong. You're taking care of your child. And that's the most important thing." Hearing those words, Emily felt something inside her break free. The weight of shame she had carried since Karen first approached her began to lift. She looked down at Lily, who was still calm and peaceful, and whispered, "Mommy's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's okay." Daniel placed his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. His voice was low but full of emotion. "See, I told you. You're not wrong. You're doing exactly what you should be doing." The crowd, sensing the truth of the situation, grew bolder. Someone clapped softly, and soon a few others joined in. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a clear message of support. Emily felt her chest tighten with emotion at the unexpected kindness. Karen, however, was not ready to admit defeat. "This is unbelievable," she muttered, her voice sharp but weaker than before. "You're all encouraging inappropriate behavior. You'll regret this when people stop respecting public spaces." The older officer's expression hardened slightly. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to calm down. If you continue to harass this family, you could be the one facing consequences." Karen's eyes widened in shock. "Me? I'm the victim here." "I was only trying to protect the park." But even as she spoke, the crowd's disapproval grew clearer. A mother standing nearby spoke up, her tone filled with quiet strength. "No, you weren't protecting anything. You were attacking a woman for loving her baby. That's not protection. That's cruelty." Karen's face twisted and she clutched her bag tightly as if searching for control she had already lost. She looked around one last time, but the support she expected was gone. The crowd was united against her. The officers were firm. Daniel and Emily stood strong together. Emily felt her body relax slowly. The fear that had gripped her since the beginning started to ease. For the first time since the confrontation began, she allowed herself to believe that everything would be all right. The tall officer turned to her once more, his voice gentle. "Ma'am, you don't have to worry. You're safe here. No one has the right to stop you from caring for your baby." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks, but they were tears of relief this time. She smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you." Daniel's eyes glistened as well, though he stayed composed for her sake. He leaned down and kissed Emily's forehead gently. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "You stayed strong." Emily closed her eyes, holding Lily close. The warmth of her husband's words, the kindness of strangers, and the fairness of the officers all blended into a powerful moment she knew she would never forget. Karen stood silently, her pride crumbling, her argument lost. The park that had once been her stage now felt like a mirror reflecting her own unkindness back at her. And as the sun dipped slightly lower in the sky, the atmosphere of the park began to shift again, not back to the way it was before, but toward something deeper. For Emily, it became a moment of truth, a moment where fear was replaced by courage and shame was replaced by dignity. The park was quiet now, but not the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of anticipation. The air seemed charged, as if the tension between Emily, Daniel, and Karen had settled into a still, fragile balance. People lingered nearby, curious and concerned, but no one wanted to interfere directly. They simply watched, sensing that something important was happening. Emily sat on the bench, Lily resting comfortably in her arms. The tiny baby's soft breathing and gentle movements were a stark contrast to the storm that had erupted around them. Daniel remained by her side, his posture protective, his eyes scanning the crowd and the woman who had caused all this trouble. Karen, however, was far from finished. Her face was red, her eyes narrowed, and she planted her hands firmly on her hips as she glared at Emily. "I can't believe you think this is okay," she shouted, her voice breaking slightly from frustration. "There are rules. People don't want to see this. You should leave immediately." Emily's hands shook slightly as she held Lily, but she took a deep breath and lifted her head. She had spent too long feeling fear and shame, letting Karen's words weigh on her. Now she felt something different, a quiet, burning determination. "I'm not leaving," Emily said softly but firmly, her voice steady. "I'm taking care of my baby. Lily is hungry and she needs me, that is all. I am not hurting anyone. I am not doing anything wrong." Daniel's eyes softened with pride. He had seen the spark of courage return to Emily's face, and he knew that whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. He took her hand in his and gave it a gentle squeeze. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She tried to speak, but Emily continued, her words gaining strength. "You may not understand what it means to be a mother," Emily said, looking directly at Karen now. "But it is my job to care for my child. There is nothing shameful in that. If you feel uncomfortable, that is your choice, but it does not give you the right to make me feel ashamed." A hush fell over the small crowd. Passers-by who had been watching quietly now nodded or whispered words of encouragement. A few stepped forward to speak. A middle-aged man holding his young daughter's hand said firmly, "Ma'am, you are wrong. She is feeding her baby. There is nothing wrong with that. You should leave her alone." Another woman, sitting on a nearby bench, added, "Yes, we all understand that babies need care. You cannot judge her for doing what is natural." Karen's face twisted with frustration. She opened her mouth to argue again, but the officers had been watching silently. One of them, the taller officer with a kind face, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but authoritative, "it is clear that this woman has done nothing wrong. Feeding a child is a mother's right, and you are the one disturbing the peace. You are making the situation worse, not better." Karen's hands tightened into fists at her sides. "But," she began, then faltered. Her anger was strong, but it was beginning to falter against the reality of the crowd's disapproval and the officer's authority. Emily, sensing the shift, spoke again, her voice carrying calm strength. "I understand that you may feel strongly about this, but kindness matters more than judgment. What you have done today has hurt me, frightened me, and caused unnecessary conflict. I hope one day you can understand that caring for your child is never wrong." Karen froze. The words, though gentle, cut through her anger in a way she had not expected. For a moment she seemed to falter, unsure of how to respond. The crowd's quiet murmurs grew louder, voices expressing support for Emily and Daniel. "You're right," whispered a young mother nearby. "We should protect each other, not shame each other." A teenage boy in the crowd added, "Nobody should call the police on a mother for feeding her baby. That's just cruel." Karen's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. She looked around, but the faces she expected to support her now displayed disapproval, confusion, and even sympathy for Emily. Her confidence, so evident only moments ago, had begun to crumble. Daniel placed his hand gently on Emily's shoulder, feeling her strength grow with every passing moment. "See?" he whispered. "You are standing tall and the truth is on our side. Nothing she says can change that." Emily nodded slightly, her eyes still on Karen. The fear that had gripped her earlier now seemed small in comparison to the determination she felt. She felt proud, not just for herself but for Lily, who was nestled in her arms, already learning the lessons of courage and dignity in her first days of life. Karen finally took a step back, her voice lower, her anger less sure. You think you're right?" she muttered. Emily responded gently, "I don't think about right or wrong in terms of winning an argument. I care about my child. That is my responsibility. I hope someday you can understand what it means to protect and nurture someone you love." The officers watched silently, their presence firm but non-threatening. They did not need to say anything more. The situation had shifted. Karen's anger had lost its audience. The crowd had subtly but firmly taken Emily's side. For Emily, this was a quiet victory. Not one of loud celebration, but of inner strength. She had faced judgment and fear and emerged with dignity and tact. She felt the warmth of support not just from her husband and the officers, but from the small community that had gathered around her. Daniel squeezed her hand again. "I am proud of you," he said softly. "You showed strength even when it was hard." Emily smiled, tears forming but unashamed. "Thank you," she whispered. "I never imagined it would feel so relieving to simply do what a mother must do." Karen, sensing the loss of control, muttered something under her breath and finally stepped back, muttering. She seemed defeated, though her pride would not allow her to leave quietly. Slowly she turned and walked away, the sound of her steps fading into the distance. As the tension left the park, Emily breathed deeply, her shoulders relaxing. Lily cooed softly in her arms, unaware of the conflict, but Emily felt a profound connection with her child. She had protected her baby, and she had protected herself. She had faced judgment and emerged stronger for it. The small crowd began to disperse, some nodding at Emily and Daniel, others offering quiet smiles of approval. The officers returned to their car, satisfied that the situation had been handled calmly and fairly. Emily looked at Daniel, her eyes bright. "I can't believe this happened," she said softly. "It was so unnecessary, but I feel stronger now. I won't let fear stop me from caring for Lily, not ever." Daniel smiled and held her close. "That's the lesson here," he said. "No matter what others think, love and kindness always come first. You've shown that today." Emily nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. The park had witnessed a confrontation, yes, but it had also witnessed courage, compassion, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. And as they packed their things and prepared to leave, Emily whispered to Lily, "Mommy will always protect you no matter what, and no one can ever take away the love we share." With that, the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park. What had begun as fear and humiliation ended in strength and understanding, a reminder that even in the most challenging moments, kindness and love are more powerful than anger and judgment. Emily and Daniel walked hand in hand, Lily cradled safely between them, leaving behind not only a park but a lesson that would stay with them forever. Courage is quiet, love is unshakable, and kindness is stronger than cruelty. The sun had started its slow descent, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The park, once alive with the noise of children and the rustle of leaves, now carried a calmer, softer tone. Birds chirped their evening songs, and the gentle breeze whispered through the trees as if carrying away the remnants of the confrontation that had taken place only hours before. Emily and Daniel walked slowly toward their car, Lily safely nestled in her stroller, wrapped in a soft blanket. The events of the afternoon weighed heavily on Emily's mind, yet her heart carried a new sense of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She held Lily's tiny hand in hers and thought about how fragile and precious life could be, and how fiercely she wanted to protect it. As they walked, Daniel glanced at Emily, sensing the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "You did so well today," he said softly. "I've never been more proud of you." Emily smiled faintly, a mixture of exhaustion and relief on her face. "I was so scared at first," she admitted. "I thought everyone was against me. I felt trapped, like I couldn't even protect Lily from their judgment. But somehow I found the strength to keep going." Daniel nodded. "And you weren't alone. You had me. You had Lily. And you had the truth on your side. No one can take that away from you." The memory of Karen's harsh words and disapproving gaze still lingered, but it no longer frightened Emily. Instead, it reminded her of how strong she could be when faced with unfairness. She realized that courage wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about moving forward in spite of it. As they reached their car, Daniel gently helped Emily lift Lily into her car seat. Emily adjusted the blanket around her daughter and then sat in the passenger seat, letting out a long sigh. "I never imagined that feeding my baby could turn into such a public ordeal," she said with a small laugh, tinged with disbelief. Daniel chuckled softly as he started the engine. "I know it's absurd, but think about it. Today wasn't just about feeding Lily. It was about standing up for what's right even when others try to make you feel small." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. She thought back to the moment when the officers arrived and how calmly they assessed the situation. She remembered the kind faces of strangers in the park who had spoken words of encouragement, and she remembered the quiet courage that had grown inside her, rising stronger with every tense moment. "You know," Emily said, glancing at Daniel, "I used to worry that people would always judge me, that no matter what I did, someone would criticize me. Today I learned that I can face it, and I can protect myself and Lily. That's more important than anyone's opinion." Daniel reached over and held her hand tightly. "Exactly. And every time you feed Lily, every time you care for her, you're teaching her something too. You're showing her that love and kindness are more powerful than fear or judgment. That's a lesson that will stay with her forever." Emily smiled, her eyes softening as she looked down at Lily, who was now blinking sleepily. The baby's tiny fingers curled around hers, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. A love so deep and pure, it made the hardships of the day seem small in comparison. "Do you think she understands?" Emily whispered, speaking to Lily. "Do you feel safe, little one?" Lily cooed softly, her tiny hands reaching up toward her mother's face. Emily laughed quietly, brushing a soft lock of hair from her baby's forehead. "I'll always protect you, Lily," she said, "no matter what happens." As the car drove through the quiet streets, the sky turning shades of deep orange and purple, Emily reflected on the day's events. She realized that life would always have challenges, moments of fear and embarrassment, and people who would try to judge or control others. But she also realized that the strength to face those moments was always inside her. It only needed to be discovered. Daniel watched Emily thoughtfully. He had seen her grow stronger in a matter of hours, and he felt a deep sense of admiration. "I think this will be a story we'll remember for the rest of our lives," he said quietly. "Not because of what she did wrong, because there was no wrong, but because of how she stood up for what's right." Emily nodded. "Yes, today was hard, but it also taught me something very important. The world may try to make us feel small, but love and courage are bigger than fear and judgment. And kindness. Kindness can change everything." They parked the car outside their home and carried Lily inside, their movements careful and gentle, as if the world outside had left them untouched by its chaos. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the evening filling the rooms. Emily laid Lily in her crib, watching her chest rise and fall with each gentle breath. Daniel moved to sit beside her on the couch. "You handled everything so gracefully," he said. "Not everyone could have done what you did." Emily leaned back, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. "I had to," she said simply. "For Lily, for us, and for myself. I don't want to live in fear of judgment. I want to live in love and kindness." Daniel smiled, pulling her close. "And that's exactly what we'll do. Together we'll face whatever comes our way. We'll protect Lily and we'll teach her what truly matters." Emily felt a quiet pride. The day had begun with fear and embarrassment, had been filled with tension and uncertainty, but now it ended with hope, love, and understanding. She realized that life would continue to bring challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had the courage to stand tall, and she knew she would always find strength in the love of her family. As she gazed at Lily, sleeping peacefully under the soft glow of the nightlight, Emily whispered one last promise. "No matter what happens in this world, you will always be safe with me, and I will always love you." Daniel kissed her forehead, his eyes soft with emotion. "We're a family," he said, "and love will always guide us." Today was a lesson, yes, but it's only the beginning of a lifetime of learning and protecting each other. Emily smiled, feeling the warmth of the words, the love of her husband, and the innocence of her child. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to feel completely at peace. She had faced judgment, fear, and conflict, and she had found strength, courage, and kindness on the other side. The night grew darker outside, but inside the house, warmth and light filled every corner. The memory of the park, the confrontation, and the small acts of support from strangers became a quiet reminder of something essential, that even in the most difficult moments, love and courage can shine brighter than fear or anger. And as Emily held Lily one last time before placing her back in her crib, she whispered softly, "We'll be okay. Always." Daniel and Emily sat together quietly, letting the calm of the night embrace them. They had faced a challenge, yes, but they had done so together with courage and kindness, and in that they had found a lesson far more valuable than they could have imagined. That love, patience, and compassion are the strongest shields of all. For Emily, for Daniel, and for little Lily, the day's events became a story of hope, a story of resilience, and a story that would be remembered for a lifetime. A story not about fear or judgment, but about the quiet, unstoppable power of love. And in the soft glow of the night, as the city outside settled into calm, Emily felt a deep, unshakable truth: no matter the challenges, love and kindness will always guide the way.